Jordan Sylvester joins me here today. You can learn what his team is up to by heading over to jordansylvester.com. Again, it's jordansylvester.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. But I really appreciate your time, Jordan. You've got a unique perspective on a few things, especially since you're in the investing world and the realtor world.
Thanks so much, Jack, for having me today. It is interesting how many realtors don't own real estate. One of the only reasons why I do is because when I joined Keller Williams, Gary Keller was on stage at the big family reunion conference we have, and he goes, "Every great deal that all of your investor clients have passed through your hands. Why are so many realtors helping all of these other people build passive wealth and do those things and not you?" And I then had to ask myself a very clear question when I came across a great deal and I was literally pitching it to a couple realtor friends. If I'm not going to buy this, then I'm probably not going to buy anything because it was basically $100,000 opportunity. And so all I did was call one of my investors, said, "Hey, did you want to partner?" And said, "Hey, did you want to buy?" And then that's how I jumped into the first one.
It's especially interesting that you bring that up. I hear that as a recurring thing that it's funny the lessons that we can learn from the people around us or the activity that's going on around us, but never take the jump ourselves. Why do you think that is?
I think everyone just has a level of fear, right? And so again, for anything as a realtor, you do see a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And a lot of times when people are selling their investments, it happens to be in situations that aren't always positive. And so when you do run into those really tough times, because the simple things that happen in life, the simple moves, the simple transactions, those happen so frequently and easily that when the bad ones come, you have a little bit probably more reservation about the bad tenants you've run into, the flip that he tried to do and they lost their money, or things changing and you're just looking at it, or just the market condition. You're probably too focused on all the minutia instead of just taking the big picture outtake and then adjusting for the minutia, but you're too focused on all the minor things that could go wrong so that you don't take the step forward to actually engage in the things that could easily go right for you.
So could you talk a little bit about what made you take that first step? You said the Gary Keller. I actually point to his book quite a bit because everybody looks at Rich Dad Poor Dad, Think and Go Rich, those type of books, but I think those some of those books are for your mindset, and like The Millionaire Real Estate Investor is this is how you take some action. What was that first experience like when you decided to jump in, and what did you try to tackle?
So what ended up happening was I had a friend who was looking to sell their property. I walked through the property. It needed some work and he wanted out quick. I said, "Okay, we can get it up next week." I said, "Hey, if I had to buy it now, price." Basically, I always use eBay as my reference point. If I had a client who could come in, buy it today, real quick, get it off your hands, what would you want? He goes, 100 grand. I go, "Okay, if we list it in a couple of days, you might get 120." He goes, "I don't care. Just if you can give me 100 grand, like right now, close it in a couple of weeks, I'm more than happy to take that and go." Said, "Okay, let me see what I can do." So, of course, next thing I do is I leave the property and jump in my car and I call a couple of my investors, say, "Hey, I've got this thing on the go." Then I call two of my realtor buddies who've got a huge investment like crowd around them and said, "Hey, I've got this thing." And then I was sitting there, like I said, and these words from Gary Keller came into the back of my mind. And all of a sudden I picked up my phone and I called one of my buddies who has money, but he doesn't really like to get involved in the investment side, which I was more than happy to do. So I just called up and said, "Hey, I got this great opportunity. Looks like we already got the 20% loan to value just by buying it outright. So the refi should be easy. It only needs probably about 15 grand in renovations at the time." And so I go, "Hey, if you're up for it, let's go 50-50. I'll take care of everything. You just fund the money and the closing fees, and then we'll split the profits at the end." He goes, "Okay, let's go." So that was pretty much the call. I called one guy, called another guy, and it was done. I went back in the next day, made the $100,000 offer to my buddy, took it off his hands, turned around, refinanced it for 100. We got an appraisal when we were done the renovations about 135 grand, netted out actually 100%, though, like a perfect burn that scenario, and left it rented. We just sold it this past year. We had it rented for the next 3.5, 4 years with the same tenant, 1,200 bucks a month for net cash flow of about 400. So great opportunity we made, and we ended up selling it for 260,000 when we did sell. Again, an overall amazing project, and not every project was as, of course, as glamorous as that one. And I can talk about some of what happened later. And I had a couple other really good projects that did do very well as well. And then we ran into the 2022 fall off just as I was ramping up. And that's where my world adjusted the investment world a
Mhm.
little bit and learned some really tough lessons about what interest rates can do and refinancing and how fast the market can move. But yeah, when you look at that first deal, the difference was is I just had to ask myself, like I'd helped at that point. I'd already been an investment realtor. That was one of my quotes was I helped build people's businesses, helped them build their retirements, did all that stuff. And so it was really interesting as I went about doing that. I wasn't doing it for my own family and for myself. I did keep my first property as a rental, had put in my a tenant that I knew, and that was a bad idea because then they got into trouble and then it created this whole thing. And so again, I didn't like it. Even when I got into renting again, I got a management company myself because I did not enjoy managing tenants. Because the hard part is when I'm the owner, I don't operate like a business, I operate with my heart because as a realtor, that's my general position. Whereas in business, you need to operate in business. So I hired a company to help me do that because it was much better for me and my family that I wasn't managing the day-to-day operations or directly with the client, even though most of the time I, of course, still walked through. But I could lean on the advice of the management company when the tenant would ask for something or need something, they could respond and act on my behalf instead of me having to feel like I was caught in this weird spot between somebody, of course, who's struggling and myself, who really wasn't at the time, in that whole balance of things. Because I found it really hard when I knew that it wouldn't hurt me to really give them a break, but it wasn't the right business decision because basically, as you continue to do that most of the time, then it becomes a habit and it runs down the road.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to backtrack on you a little bit there. That first deal that you did, it sounded like you relied on your relationships on every aspect. You talked about the person that you knew that was selling the property. You pulled in somebody else that you knew that would likely have the money. It's a lot of relationship taking not leveraging those relationships in your life. Is that something that you continue to do today with
Yeah.
everything you
So
do?
my whole world is built on relationships. Money is a byproduct of relationships. The stronger your relationships, the more you're able to lean on and trust the people around you and add more and more professionals around you, the stronger you become. The more I lean in on my area of strength and then understand where my weaknesses are and then backfill those weaknesses. So again, I started as a renovator. I don't renovate anymore. I hire that out. I started doing a lot of the things myself and then I hired accountants and lawyers and people just because at the end of the day, when you're first starting out, it's oh, you make a mistake and then you realize, oh, I maybe need this person or maybe that. But that's why I like the relationships that I've built out through my real estate business first, and then through, of course, the investment business allowed me the opportunity to be able to grow. And it's all on the fact that I could pick up a phone, have a phone call. They trusted and knew that I'd like how my brain operates, the fact that like the deals and the way I spoke with them, it's not something I haven't done for them in another scenario where they've done it for another client. That's all in the ability to communicate well, to them to trust me well, to know that I have every good intention and to work well with them and try to create as much clarity as you can. And at the same time, be as honest about what hey, I'm learning. As long as we communicate, if there's a problem or if something doesn't go right exactly as you thought it would, just let me know. Let's make sure we're always in good communication, finding our way to the end result that everyone's happy. Because again, when I move a little bit by the seat of my pants, I fly along. I have conversations, but a lot of my stuff isn't written down in the most call it legal way. I do a lot of things where I shake a hand and I do this and I do that. And then I get to the end result and put everything back together. And then I say, here's what happened. Maybe something wasn't exactly what was originally discussed. Or then we just have a discussion to make sure we get to the end result where everyone's happy. And that's my objective. And even if it means I have to give up a little to make that work, I'm okay with it. I
Mm.
learned to better structure. So that happens less and less.
Yeah, it's just especially important to get things jotted down like that because it's a recurring theme that I keep bringing up in this is the fact that you either start off with an awkward conversation or you end with one. And
Yep.
if you don't get those ducks in a row, things can end pretty poorly pretty quickly.
Yep.
So, based on all of that, you said that things unraveled for you here over the last couple of years. Could you tell us a little bit more? Go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd done about 12 transactions following that first one and then was finalizing that one. And then basically we got out of 2021 and I had a couple properties that I was still holding, but it flipped. I think it was, I still was holding three. So I'd flipped seven or eight of them and then was in the process. So between February 27th and about April 15th of 2022, I bought seven properties. Now I did pick up a business partner along the way as I had bought three and then I added him and then we bought the other four because he was doing a couple, I was doing a couple. And together we figured we could amplify because he really liked to general contract and manage the property position. And I like to go get the money and free like deal on that side of the house. So we came together, we just came together at one of the moments where it was probably the worst time in recent memory to amplify your undertaking because we leveraged about $4 million at the time to buy those seven properties. And before we could even close on the first one, the market had already shifted almost down about 20%. By the time we got through the next window, we lost about 30% of the 33 to 37% of the value of real estate over the next little while there. We rebounded to about 18% loss from our absolute high here in Essex County, Windsor, Canada. But we're still, we were holding there and we liquidated every asset we had in it to the tune of almost $380,000 the wrong way, which is better than what it would have been if we had bought where we did and done what we did. We had a 23% fallout rate, but the way the market had gone. And so we got into a bit of a situation where we were able to get out of all the property, liquidate everything. We had one major debtor at the end, and then my world personally blew up, but that's okay. Just in the process of fixing that now.
And that type of thing happens. You see this quite a bit. It's one of those things that my business partner and I have noticed more than once, that I wouldn't be surprised if half of the people that are on this show have a up from the ashes type of story to be told. I think the thing that is really to learn from it all is to stick with it. It's those people that they stick with it, learn from it, and allow it to shape your future versus uh, dwelling in the destruction.
So I will admit that it was a very good life lesson. I'm actually grateful because one of the questions, of course, we chatted about was okay, so let's say it didn't happen when it did. What were the odds we wouldn't have continued to amplify? Wouldn't have continued in leverage? Like we would have been just, oh, satisfied after we go from him buying two, him and me buying two to buying seven together. What do you think happens if all of that had worked out and we then had all the money? Would we, and we could leverage $20 million instead of only four? Do you think we would have hesitated? Because we wouldn't have learned the lesson. And then that would have been probably even more devastating to everybody at that time because again, we have other investors and people and responsibilities to people. Because again, some of that money was not bank held. That some of that money was investor held. And so there's some people who lost along with us. And again, I had had the attitude that I couldn't lose because up and until that point, I couldn't see it. And I didn't understand how fast I always thought, okay, if something bad happens, I'll just shift and I'll position and get out, but I just couldn't see the market would fall basically almost 30% in less than 5, 6 months. It just didn't seem possible. But our interest rate went from zero, the fixed overnight rate went from 0 to 5% in basically, I think it was 11 months. But in the first 6 months, it went up to 375. And so overnight, I couldn't refinance. I couldn't get the lending back. There was no way to do anything because by the time I went to do any of that, the value of the market had just disappeared. Because we had about 721,000 average sale price here in Windsor, Essex. We dropped down to 477.
Hmm. Wow. That's a huge market shift. Is it recovering now?
Yeah, our market's been stable for about 2 years now. So we're at 570 to 600 right now. We've restabilized. That's what I meant earlier by that 18%. We're still down. So again, but again, people have been able to stabilize. The question is going to be is we had 2% money. Unlike the United States, our banks, we renew our mortgages almost every 5 years, kind of like commercial does in the US. We don't have 30-year fixed term. We have 30-year amortization or 25-year amortizations here, but we don't have
Mhm.
fixed terms for that long. So every 5 years, the problem is there's a lot of people at 2% interest rates or 2.5 that are going to be at 5 or 5.5 when their renewals come for their mortgages. So it's going to be an interesting situation in Canada over probably the next 2 years to see how that plays out with everybody.
Yeah, I actually think we're going to see a lot of that here in the United States as well. In fact, more so than anything else. I think we're going to see a lot of struggling people and companies. You're talking multi-million dollar businesses, right? And those interest rates are double, triple, or
Mhm.
higher. How can it not impact those investments?
I think in the US, from everything I'm hearing of what's about to happen, is the commercial markets are about to get completely destroyed only because they have the same balloon. Like they've all ballooned up trying to protect for the last couple of years. And now it's at the witching hour, and the banks themselves won't be able to. Basically, the banks are going to be standing there
Right.
holding all of this real estate that's no longer worth what it was. And similarly to the '08 crisis that happened, again, that was more automotive. That was a different, some of the different things that happened. And again, we border Detroit. So for us, we're part of that world. When the automotive industry got crushed in '08, we got hit really hard here. I think in the US, though, as a whole, it's going to be interesting because everyone, like all the office space is vacating because so many people work from home after COVID, just a different culture, different society. So it's very interesting to watch what's going to happen on that side of the market and what that means for the overall market as far as real estate goes in the US. I to watch and see how that might play out. But again, if you want to have a good idea, you can just look at what's happening in Canada because we've already been going through it on the residential side for the last basically 2 years.
Just to remind everybody, jordansylvester.com. You can learn more of what Jordan is doing there. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor and share this with one of your investor friends. And if you're watching us on one of the YouTubes, do us a quick and subscribe. So, Jordan, you've been very transparent and open with me regarding some of the turmoil you went through.
Mhm.
I'm sure that has to build, there's a level of authenticity that you're obviously running with your business. Can you talk a little bit to that, like how the importance of that is?
Yeah, so one of the decisions I've always been me, and it's come with its good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes because I'm a very direct human being. I tend to be very much go getter. I don't really slow down much. And most of the people, whenever I say I'm in business, I'm the person making the decisions. It doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to you. I am listening, but I'm going to make the best decision based on what my perspective is. Now, I'm willing to listen to yours. And if you can change my mind, then of course I'll do that. But in a relationship of this, I act A type alpha, right? Like I do not like to be in a, and that was one of the mistakes I did make was I made a business partner who I put at the same level. And even though I might have made some different decisions, I felt like I was in a position of I couldn't just decide. I had to
Mhm,
give him enough credence, which was a mistake. Because with most of my investors, they like the fact that Jordan takes care of it. I trust Jordan. He knows what he's going to do. And that's built on the 17 years of real estate plus the 5 years of investing. So there's a lot of structure that they can lean on and see the history of what I'm capable of. And so when you think about authenticity, I recognize I had to stop pretending I could be something else in some ways. Like I want to be the guy who plays well with others in the sense of like that equality, but it's not how I do not operate well there because I get very uncomfortable because I want some, I do want, I'm in a marriage, right? I've been married for 16 years. I love my wife, but again, in our marriage, we've made agreements about I'm responsible for the outcomes, meaning no matter what happens, no matter what decisions are made for the most part in our marriage, I'm responsible and she has a voice. It's not that she's silent by any means. And similarly, though, that's worked out well for us in our marriage. It's only on the things that I truly think are very important and there might be disagreement. And then we try to work through it to the best ability. And then somebody has to make a choice and take responsibility, which tends to be me because that's I like to sit there and I don't really do well on the other side. And again, in any relationship, you make your decisions, right? If that's not for you, then I might not be the right person to be in business with. And I've learned to just be as honest as I can with people. I don't mind investing money and then just walking away. If you want to take control, then I'm a money partner. I'll step all the way back, but I can't be in the middle point where I'm making decisions and not making decisions. I have to ask for permission and do all like I just don't play well there. So part of that authenticity that was building was you feel weird. You feel like, oh, am I even right to feel this way? Should I change? Should I try to be something else? And then you just sit down and go, okay, but I am me. And there's nothing wrong as long as I'm respectful and I'm kind and I'm upfront about what this looks like and what the expectations are, then everyone has the ability to make a decision on whether they want to be in that relationship or not, like
mhm.
at that level. And so with that though, that's again when everything did go bad. I was so scared I'd lose relationships that I fought tooth and nail for almost 2 years to try to survive, and then just figured out there's not much I could do because there's no quick ways to make money like there had been. And so I had to have real conversations with these people, and every single one of them looked at me and is, no, we're fine. Yeah, it sucks, but we're fine. And I was like, how are we fine? Because in my mind, I thought, because in their mind, they invested with the person, not the money that did come in was money. And they're not happy about how maybe some of that played out. But they understood that it wasn't like I did anything inherently wrong to them. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And I was too ignorant and too hubris at the time to understand how dangerous the game I was playing when everything shifted and I just didn't know better. And so they actually have a lot of grace and mercy, which is something I would extend, which is what they said. They're like, what if it was in reverse? What would you do? I'm like, no, I wouldn't be mad. I'd be, it's not great, but I would be okay. And they're like, that's exactly the response. And so I've learned as long as I'm honest. And the hardest part is I was in this weird place where I didn't know how to tell them the truth. I didn't know how to actually divulge that I was struggling so much on my side, which they were actually somewhat upset with that I didn't do some of these things sooner that then still caused them harm. In the end, we got there anyway. They're like, but we wouldn't have wanted you to suffer this long. Like our relationships were going to be okay. So if I can lean on this in this conversation is know that sometimes the worst thing you can do is just not say something because if you talk to people most of the time, they're not thinking the way you're thinking. And you just have a real conversation. As long as you've built good relationships and the people are of a caring nature, they're not going to be happy if they're losing money. They're not going to be happy maybe if things don't go well, but they'll be understanding because they're going to look at it and say, did you intentionally make this mistake? Did you do these things intentionally to harm us? Of course not, if that's the attitude. So it was a very freeing thing. It still took a lot to accept. And I'll say this, even though they say it to me, my brain's, yeah, no, but you're still responsible. You still owe it, you this and this. And they're basically saying, no, we understood when we invested, there was risk. I didn't understand the amount of risks they were in because I just didn't think I could lose, which was my own mistake. Because up until that point, for the past 15 years since the last crash, we hadn't lost, even with all my investors, we hadn't lost at all, which is a pretty
Yeah.
impressive record.
No, that's interesting. It's amazing what our mind can dream up, and we always paint such far worse picture or fiction than just facing a lot of this head on.
Mhm. And that's why I would say to anyone, if you are if y the again, hard conversations are hard for a reason, but I promise not having it will be much harder because you're gonna stay in that weird state. At least here's the thing, let's say they did get mad and they all walked away. Like, in the end, that was like, there wasn't anything I was gonna be able to do to stop their reaction realistically. I could only control what I could control at that point. At the point that I'd made the mistakes and everything was, call it, washed in the water and everything was where we were, there wasn't a lot left that I was going to be able to do other than just tell them the truth, which they already knew. I was just trying to figure out a way to reinvest, figure out how to invest again in real estate or do things. But everything right now in our world is term. You can't do anything quick. There's not a quick fix, quick flip. The market is very stable. So it's buy, invest, and hold. That is, there's still a lot of room for that. But our market is not like it was where I could pick up a property 3 months later, put 100 grand into it and sell it for 50 to 100 grand more. That just doesn't exist in the current real estate market under the current economy that we're playing in. Because again, the market did a lot of the heavy lifting for a few years there when it would go up 3 and 4% a month for us.
A lot of this has to do with mindset too, Jordan. You went through a pretty rough time there, and to pull yourself back up and get back in the game, can you talk a little bit about what you went through and what you might be doing on a regular basis? I drive my family a little crazy because I got a podcast or audiobook playing in my pocket on my phone without
Mhm.
headphones on, every day, all day, just to help me stay in the proper mindset. What do you do? Or is this just come natural to you?
No, I've been through a lot in my life. I've made a lot. Like to learn the hard way, I would say it. I don't generally learn by listening. I learn by doing, and I try to understand and see where I've gone wrong. The thing I'll say is I've made the similar mistake before. It's always in a different way. It's not identical because I don't generally make the same mistakes twice. You learn and you keep adjusting, but you get into arenas of life that you haven't been in before. The lesson you learned over here a few years ago is applicable over here. You just didn't realize it in time. And that's where, again, my pride has to be something I'm learning to remain as humble as I can, at as many people as I can, talk to people at all times. So one of the ways that I got through this was I meet with a couple guys usually Monday, Tuesdays, and Fridays, and we go for breakfast at 7 a.m. and we just chat about life. And sometimes them helping me, and sometimes it's me helping them. It's just being in community with some good friends and doing that. And so for me, it's just about having I'm a part of the Verge real estate team as well. And when I've been in trouble, I've been able to lean on them for help, right? It's having the right people, my wife and my kids, like everybody around me when I was really going through a rough time, kind of understood where I was waiting for me to get to the other side. So a couple weeks ago, I turned 40. Everything blew up for me in April finally. And I gave myself a few months just to mourn it. I wasn't sure how I'd react when I finally, call it, laid down and let what was done be finalized and move on. But it was very interesting because as soon as I got my energy back, that was the biggest thing. My energy was so stolen for almost 2 years. It was really hard to do anything because I just felt like I was going everywhere trying to do anything to survive. And in the end, I still lost. It's like it felt fairly defeated, but at the end, I still know that I tried. I didn't give up. And I wouldn't even say the decision I made was the right choice. Every professional I talked to said, "This is the only choice left for you." I went, "Okay." And what's interesting, even in that choice, it went so much smoother than I expected it to. It's not to say it hasn't been hard. I want to be very clear. This has been brutal, but I've been able to withstand all of the trauma, all of the loss, everything that's happened because I have a wife who supports me. I have my kids and I have my relationships with my friends and my investors, even the ones that lost, all still standing beside me, working with me to get through it. And now that I'm on the other side of it and I'm looking at new opportunity and new adventures and new things, my objective is, again, it's okay. We're on a new side of this thing, but I want to maintain my humility. I try to rebuild my world on this side of the coin. And as a realtor, as an investor, as somebody who wants to continue to support in the community, how do we deal with one of the biggest things I'm trying to figure out is how do we deal with the affordable living crisis and all of the North America, it feels, and real solid strategies around that, working with a lot of my investors and people and trying to figure out how do we support our community? How do we make money doing this as well? And really come with some loving care towards our community. And that can be the investor, the realtor, or just a friend. So that's really the focus change. But it took me going to the ground, basically breaking back down my entire personality, like, and then realizing it's okay to be broken. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to fail. And I learned that lesson a few years ago. But again, I will say everything has its scale. It's okay to fail there, but it's not okay to fail here. And then you work
Mhm.
through that and you go, okay, you know what? It's okay to fail at all times, honestly, because the sooner you recognize a failure, the sooner you can learn from the information that it gave you so you can make better decisions moving forward. So you can have better relationships, better family, better mental health, better spiritual health, physical and financial. Everything gets better when you're better. It's really hard to grow and to get yourself out of something when you're not okay.
I really appreciate you being as open as you have been, Jordan. Just to remind everybody, and if they want to connect with you, head over to jordansylvester.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. Before we jump into the rapid fire questions, Jordan, is there any
Yep.
question or concept you wished we would have covered so far?
No, I think we covered the big piece for me is what I want people to know is life is going to be hard. Business is hard, investing is hard, but it's still worth it. The lessons you learn are the most valuable thing you'll ever pick up. The relationships and those pieces of the puzzle as you keep piecing it together. Don't be scared to take the first step. Just do it. Just try to get yourself into the mindset of investing for your future. Real estate is one of the many options that exists out there, but be investing in your future, whether that's intellectually, financially, or physically. Those are three very important arenas, but I would recommend the most important is going to be between your ears. Because if you get that right, everything else comes along in time.
No, really well said. If you're ready, we'll jump into some rapid fire questions and close out the show.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So, first of all, what lie do real estate investors tell themselves and sometimes to others?
Uh that deals are easy to find.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think we see a lot of that, especially when people get into the concept of wholesaling for the first time. They get sold that concept and it
Yeah, talk to
it's just
1,000
mailbox
people,
money.
find 2 deals.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly. The amount of effort doesn't match the pitch.
Yeah.
What book do you recommend or what are you reading right now?
Lifestyle Investor was a really cool book that I do recommend. It's more business than it is real estate in some aspects, but it's how you create deals. When I was reading that book, that was helping me understand how to communicate with my investors and look at real estate opportunities using different strategies. But the one thing, it's the little kickers, the little pieces of the puzzle that you can do as you're investing with people that you keep some equity along the way. You do different things. So as you bring your knowledge and your assets to the table, you get long term rewards.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Failure is learning.
What single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you or your business?
Tool that I've added. I would say using, like, the Google Docs and being able to quickly run numbers through it. So I have a direct setup where I put everything through the way I see deals. And so when somebody says, "I have this great deal," I just drop all the numbers in, and it either says, "Here's your return," or, "Here isn't your return." And because I'm a realtor, I do get this great benefit of being able to check the future value of things and current value of things fairly easily in the market. So I have a quick way of doing that. So for me, building out a model that I can feed the information into is very helpful.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. Jordan, this you've brought a ton of value. I really appreciate it. Again, it is jordansylvester.com, and that'll be clickable in the show notes, but I hope you'll come back again sometime. This was great.
For sure, Jack. Thank you so much for having me.